in the shadowed corners of D&D's multiverse, where the boundary between life and death grows thin and indistinct, there exist beings who walk an eternal tightrope between two worlds. They are the dampiers, creatures cursed or blessed with a spark of vampiric power that forever changes their nature without fully transforming them into the undead. Neither fully alive nor entirely dead, dampiers occupy a liminal space that grants them power, but condemns them to an existence defined by hunger, isolation, and constant struggle against their own nature. The Dampier represents one of the most complex lineages introduced to 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons through Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft in 2021. Unlike traditional races that define what you are from birth, the Dampier is a lineage, a fundamental transformation that can happen to anyone at any point in their existence. A human might become a Dampier, an elf might be transformed, a dragonborn could find their draconic heritage subsumed by vampiric power. The lineage doesn't care about your origins. It only cares that something fundamental has changed within you, that you now carry within your mortal frame a fragment of the deathless hunger that defines all vampire kind. Understanding the Dampier requires first understanding the folklore roots from which this concept springs. The word Dhampir comes from Albanian, derived from dam, meaning teeth, and pir, meaning to drink, quite literally to drink with teeth. In the vampire-haunted folklore of the Balkans, particularly among Albanian, Serbian, Bulgarian, and Romanian traditions, Dampiers were the offspring of male vampires who returned from their graves to visit their widows or other women they desired in life. These children inherited supernatural abilities from their undead fathers, but remained essentially mortal, blessed, or cursed, with the ability to see and hunt the vampires that plagued their communities. In Balkan tradition, Dampiers occupied a strange social position. They were simultaneously feared for their unnatural origins and valued for their unique talents. Only Dampiers could see invisible vampires without special rituals or tools. Only Dampiers possessed the innate knowledge necessary to track and destroy their own undead kin. Serbian folklore speaks of the vampirovic, or vampire's son, a hereditary line of vampire hunters who pass their abilities from father to son across generations. Bulgarian traditions mention glog, or vampirdzia, professional Dampier hunters who traveled from village to village, offering their services in exchange for livestock or coin. The folklore Dampier was described in various ways depending on the specific tradition. Serbian legends claim Dampiers were energetic children with untamed dark hair who cast no shadow. Bulgarian accounts sometimes describe them as filthy or unkempt, with enlarged nose, eyes, or ears, sometimes even possessing a small tail. Some traditions held that Dampiers were born without bones, their bodies soft and jelly-like, destined for short and painful lives. Others maintained they were physically indistinguishable from normal humans, but possessed an indefinable quality that made others uncomfortable in their presence. What unified these varied traditions was the Dampiers' relationship with vampires. In the folklore, Dampiers were natural vampire hunters, driven by either duty, vengeance, or simple necessity to combat the undead creatures whose blood they shared. They worked as itinerant specialists, traveling through regions affected by vampiric activity, performing elaborate rituals to identify and destroy the hidden undead. They might shoot vampires with blessed bullets, transfix them with hawthorn stakes, touch lead crowns to vampire graves, or simply command vampires to leave an area through the power of their shared bloodline. Payment varied from a suit of clothing to cattle to significant sums of money, and there was never haggling over price. As late as 1959, professional Dampiers were still operating in Kosovo, a testament to how deeply these beliefs ran in Balkan culture. D&D's interpretation of the Dampier draws heavily from this folklore tradition while expanding the concept to fit the game's cosmic horror themes and mechanical needs. In Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, Dampiers are explicitly not defined as simply the children of vampires. Instead, they represent any individual who has been touched by vampiric power in a way that fundamentally transforms them without completing the transformation into full vampirism. This broader definition opens enormous storytelling possibilities while maintaining the core themes of the folkloric Dhampir: the struggle between human and monstrous nature, the hunger that never truly abates, and the unique position of being able to understand and combat the very monsters whose power you share. The many origins of dampiers. Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft provides a table of possible dampier origins, but it explicitly encourages players and dungeon masters to expand beyond these suggestions. The key requirement is that something vampiric has touched the character in a profound and irrevocable way. Understanding the various origin possibilities helps illuminate what it means to be a dampier in D&D's multiverse. The most traditional origin is biological descent from a vampire. A vampire lord might seduce or coerce a mortal, resulting in a child who carries vampiric traits from conception. These born dampiers grow up knowing they are different, watching their peers age normally, while they develop supernatural abilities. They might have been raised by their mortal parent, possibly never knowing their undead father, or they might have been claimed by their vampiric parent and raised in some dark castle or hidden haven. The psychological impact of this origin is profound. How do you reconcile knowing that one of your parents is a predatory undead creature? How do you understand your own nature when half of your heritage is fundamentally inhuman? Another common origin is surviving a vampire's bite. When a vampire feeds on a victim, that victim faces multiple potential fates. They might simply die. They might be drained of blood and rise as a vampire spawn under the vampire's control. But sometimes, rarely, something else happens. The victim survives but is transformed, carrying within them a fragment of vampiric essence that didn't complete the full transformation. Perhaps they resisted the vampire's will at a crucial moment. Perhaps they were interrupted before the transformation could complete. Perhaps some divine intervention or magical protection interfered with the process. Whatever the cause, they wake changed, marked by the vampire's kiss in a way that will define the rest of their existence. Necromantic rituals and experiments represent another origin path. A wizard researching vampirism might deliberately infect themselves with vampiric essence while maintaining safeguards to prevent full transformation. A cult might perform dark rituals intended to grant members vampiric power without the vulnerabilities. A desperate individual might make a pact with dark powers, trading part of their humanity for supernatural abilities. These intentional transformations are particularly interesting because they involve choice. The character knew, at least partly, what they were getting into. They bear responsibility for their transformation in a way that victims do not. This can create fascinating internal conflicts as they grapple with consequences they actively sought. Curses and dark bargains form yet another origin category. A powerful entity might curse someone with vampiric traits as punishment. A hag might offer power in exchange for accepting vampiric taint. A demon might grant wishes with terrible costs. These transformations often come with strings attached. The curse might have specific conditions. The bargain might require ongoing payment. The character might have been deceived about the true nature of what they were accepting. These origins create natural quest hooks, as characters might seek ways to break their curses or escape their bargains. Parasitic or symbiotic entities provide a more unusual origin. Perhaps a fiendish parasite has nested in the character's body, granting vampiric powers while slowly consuming them from within. Perhaps they've bonded with a vampiric spirit or entity, creating a partnership where mortal and undead essence coexist in one form. These origins raise questions about identity and control. Is the character still themselves, or are they being influenced by the entity within them? Do they maintain full control, or does the parasite sometimes take over? Reincarnation of a vampiric ancestor offers a metaphysical origin. In some cosmologies, souls reincarnate across multiple lifetimes. A character might discover they are the reincarnation of an ancient vampire lord, with vampiric traits bleeding through from their previous existence. They might have no memory of their past life initially, only slowly discovering their history through visions, dreams, or encounters with those who knew them in their previous incarnation. This origin creates rich role-playing opportunities as characters grapple with literal past lives and question whether they are responsible for actions taken in previous incarnations. Environmental transformation represents a more subtle origin. Prolonged exposure to vampiric influence might gradually transform someone. Living in lands ruled by vampire lords, working in tombs filled with undead, or spending too long in regions where the boundary between life and death has worn thin, might slowly infect a character with vampiric traits. These transformations are insidious, often going unnoticed until the changes have become irreversible. The character might not even realize they've become something other than what they were. Failed vampiric transformation attempts create tragic dampiers. Perhaps the character was meant to become a full vampire, but something went wrong. The transforming vampire might have been destroyed mid-process. An attempted rescue might have interrupted the transformation. Divine intervention might have prevented completion. These dampiers often carry psychological scars from their interrupted transformation, forever wondering what they would have become if the process had completed. Each origin shapes not just how the dampier came to be, but who they are fundamentally. A dampier born to vampiric parentage has had their entire life to adjust to their nature. A dampier created through sudden trauma must cope with radical and unwelcome transformation. A dampier who sought their power bears different guilt than one who was victimized. The origin is not just backstory, it is the foundation upon which the character's psychology, motivations, and relationships are built. The hunger that never sleeps. Every dampier shares one defining characteristic regardless of their origin, an insatiable hunger that can only be slaked by consuming something from the living. This hunger is not metaphorical. It is a physical, psychological, and spiritual need that manifests as a gnawing emptiness, a constant reminder of the vampiric taint that marks them. The nature of this hunger varies dramatically between individual dampiers, creating one of the lineage's most important character-defining choices. Blood represents the traditional and most common dampier hunger. These dampiers crave the blood of living creatures, feeling the same thirst that drives vampires themselves. They can taste blood in the air. They can smell it pumping through nearby veins. When they are near the injured or vulnerable, the hunger intensifies to almost unbearable levels. Some blood-hungry dampiers can sustain themselves on animal blood, draining rats, livestock, or wild game to satisfy their needs. Others find that only humanoid blood truly satisfies them. Animal blood providing only temporary relief, like drinking salt water when dying of thirst. The psychological impact of blood hunger is profound. Even good-hearted dampiers must constantly resist the urge to feed on companions, friends, or innocent strangers. They must find ethical ways to satisfy needs that are fundamentally predatory. Raw meat or flesh offers a variation on blood hunger that is somehow both more and less disturbing. These dampiers crave flesh, preferably raw and still warm. They might tear into fresh kills with fangs and fingers, consuming meat with a ferocity that frightens observers. Some can control their hunger enough to eat cooked meat, though it never satisfies them the way fresh flesh does. Others must consume their meat raw, unable to stomach anything that has been prepared or processed. This hunger can be easier to manage than bloodthirst in some ways, as meat is more socially acceptable to consume. But it can also be more disturbing to witness, as there is something viscerally wrong about watching someone tear into raw meat with the enthusiasm of a starving wolf. Cerebral spinal fluid represents one of the most disturbing possible hungers. These dampiers crave the fluid that surrounds and protects the brain and spinal cord, a hunger that seems to be associated with vampiric mind flayers or other aberrant undead. Satisfying this hunger requires access to the skull or spine of victims, making it nearly impossible to feed ethically. Some dampiers with this hunger find ways to access spinal fluid from recently deceased bodies, working as undertakers or in similar professions that provide access to corpses. Others develop elaborate justifications for their feeding, convincing themselves that their victims deserve their fate. The psychological burden of this hunger is immense, as it is virtually impossible to satisfy without doing harm. Psychic energy or life force offers a more subtle but equally consuming hunger. These dampiers feed on the mental or spiritual energy of living beings. They might drain willpower, hope, ambition, or creativity from those around them. Victims feel exhausted, depressed, or unmotivated after exposure without understanding why. The dampier might not need to physically touch their victims, instead slowly draining nearby individuals simply through proximity. This hunger can be particularly insidious because it is invisible. The dampier might not even realize they are feeding, unconsciously draining those around them. Some learn to control this hunger, consciously choosing when and on whom to feed. Others become pariahs, driving away everyone who gets close as they unconsciously consume the vitality of anyone in their vicinity. Dreams represent one of the strangest possible hungers. These dampiers must consume the dreams of sleeping beings, entering their victims' minds and devouring their subconscious visions. They might consume nightmares, granting their victims peaceful sleep while the dampier feeds on fear and anxiety. They might consume pleasant dreams, leaving victims feeling vaguely disappointed when they wake without understanding why. They might consume all dreams indiscriminately, leaving their victims in dreamless sleep that provides no true rest. This hunger requires proximity to sleeping victims and creates interesting tactical and ethical challenges. How do you feed ethically when your sustenance requires invading the most intimate spaces of others' minds? General life force or vitality offers the most flexible but also most vague hunger. These dampiers drain the essential living energy from their victims through their vampiric bite. Victims age slightly, grow weaker, become more susceptible to disease, or simply feel less vital after being fed upon. The effects might be temporary or permanent, depending on how much the dampier takes. This hunger can be managed relatively ethically by taking small amounts from many people, or by feeding only on those who are young and healthy enough to withstand the loss. But it still requires harming others to survive, creating constant moral dilemmas. The mechanics of dampier hunger in game terms are tied to the vampiric bite ability, which can be used a number of times per day equal to the character's proficiency bonus. This mechanical limitation suggests dampiers need to feed several times per day to maintain their power, though they presumably don't literally starve if they go longer without feeding. The hunger is not purely mechanical, but rather a constant psychological pressure that defines how the character experiences the world. Van Richten's guide notes that dampiers who overindulge their hunger risk losing control and forever viewing others as prey. This suggests a moral event horizon where satisfying hunger becomes the only priority, where the dampier's humanity erodes under the constant pressure of vampiric instinct. On the other hand, dampiers who resist their urges suppress them through constant molar grinding restraint. Neither extreme is healthy. Complete indulgence leads to monstrosity. Complete resistance leads to living in constant agony. Every interaction with living beings a test of willpower. The healthiest dampiers find middle paths. They might establish ethical feeding relationships with willing partners who consent to being fed upon in controlled circumstances. They might feed exclusively on evil creatures or those who have harmed others. They might develop routines and rituals that help manage their hunger, much like individuals with difficult appetites or addictions develop coping strategies. They might seek magical or alchemical aids that help suppress or redirect their hunger. The specific approach varies by individual and circumstances, but the struggle itself is universal to the dampier experience. The transformation, what remains and what is lost. When someone becomes a dampier, they undergo a fundamental transformation that affects them on every level. Van Richten's guide uses the term lineage deliberately to distinguish dampiers from traditional races. Races represent what you are born as. Lineages represent what you become, transformations so profound that they override much of what came before. The most dramatic aspect of lineage transformation is what you lose. A dragonborn who becomes a dampier loses their breath weapon, that fundamental expression of their draconic heritage. An elf loses their fey ancestry features. A dwarf loses their stone cunning. The lineage subsumes these abilities, replacing them with vampiric power. This represents more than just mechanical changes. It represents losing part of your identity, part of what made you who you were. The Dragonborn can no longer demonstrate their pride in their draconic nature through their breath. The elf no longer feels the connection to the Feywild that defined their people. The dwarf loses the intuitive understanding of stone that came from centuries of dwarven genetic memory. However, some elements do survive the transformation through the ancestral legacy trait. Any skill proficiencies from your original race remain, suggesting that learned abilities and mental faculties are not erased by vampiric transformation. More significantly, any climbing, flying, or swimming speeds from your original race can be retained. An Aarakocra dampier can keep their flight. A Triton dampier maintains their swimming speed. A Tabaxi dampier retains their climbing speed, which stacks with the dampier's own climbing speed to create truly spectacular mobility. This selective retention creates fascinating questions about identity. If a winged Aasimar becomes a dampier but keeps their wings, are they still connected to their celestial heritage? If an Aarakocra dampier can still fly, do they maintain some connection to their avian nature? The mechanical answer is no, they have lost their racial abilities. But narratively, these surviving physical traits serve as reminders of what they once were, connecting them to their previous identity even as vampiric power consumes them from within. The physical changes that accompany dampier transformation vary by individual, but tend towards certain patterns. Pale skin is almost universal as the dampier's body adjusts to carrying undead essence. The skin might become corpse cold to the touch or maintain a feverish warmth as living and undead energies war within the body. Sharp features develop as the face grows more angular and predatory. The eyes might develop a faint luminescence in darkness or take on unusual colors. Most distinctively, fangs develop, not the subtle, slightly enlarged canines of folklore, but pronounced, obviously inhuman teeth designed for piercing flesh and drawing blood. The gait and movement of dampiers often becomes unnaturally fluid and predatory. They move with a grace that seems wrong, too smooth, too effortless, as though gravity affects them slightly differently than normal beings. Their lack of need to breathe means they can move in complete silence, as they produce no breathing sounds. They can hold perfectly still in ways that living creatures cannot, their undead nature allowing them to suppress all the small unconscious movements that normally reveal life. Socially, these physical changes create immediate problems. Even when trying to appear normal, dampiers radiate something that makes others uncomfortable. Animals react with fear or aggression, sensing the predator wearing a person's shape. Children cry when dampiers approach. Paranoid individuals immediately suspect them of being monsters. Even those who cannot articulate what is wrong feel uneasy, some survival instinct whispering that the dampier is dangerous. The psychological impact of transformation depends heavily on whether it was chosen or inflicted. Dampiers who sought vampiric power might embrace their transformation, viewing lost abilities as acceptable prices for their new capabilities. They integrate their vampiric nature into their identity, becoming something new rather than mourning what they have lost. Dampiers who are transformed against their will often experience transformation as profound violation and loss. They grieve for their stolen abilities and original nature. They struggle with feeling that they have been robbed of their true selves and replaced with something monstrous. Many dampiers, regardless of how they were transformed, experience a profound sense of being between worlds. They are no longer what they were, but not fully what they have become. They occupy liminal space between life and death, between mortal and undead, between human and monster. This in-between existence can be isolating and disorienting. They don't fully belong with the living anymore, but they are not truly undead. They exist in a category of their own, unique and alone. The powers of predators. Dampiers gain a suite of abilities that reflect their vampiric nature while remaining balanced for player characters. These abilities are not as overwhelming as true vampire powers, but are distinctive enough to make Dampiers feel meaningfully different from other characters. Increased speed is the most subtle but most universally useful Dampier trait. Dampiers move at 35 feet per round rather than the standard 30 feet. This 5-foot difference seems minor, but accumulates significantly over the course of adventures. Dampiers can chase down fleeing enemies more easily. They can escape danger more effectively. They can cover more ground when exploring. The speed increase represents supernatural vigor, the fact that Dampiers are partially freed from normal mortal limitations. Dark vision to 60 feet is expected for any creature with undead heritage. Dampiers can see perfectly well in complete darkness, their vampiric nature granting them predator's vision. They perceive colors as shades of gray and darkness, but can see shapes, movements, and details clearly. This makes Dampiers natural scouts and infiltrators, able to operate in conditions that blind normal humans. Deathless nature means Dampiers don't need to breathe. This seems like a minor ability, but has significant implications. Dampiers can't suffocate or drown. They're immune to gases and vapors that require inhalation. They can survive in airless environments indefinitely. They can remain underwater as long as necessary without any risk. They can bury themselves underground or hide in sealed spaces without concern for air supply. The ability also has a subtle psychological component. Not breathing is fundamentally wrong for living creatures. Dampiers can suppress their breathing entirely, holding perfectly still in ways that are impossible for normal beings, reinforcing their inhuman nature. Spider climb represents the iconic vampire power of walking on walls and ceilings. At first level, Dampiers gain a climbing speed equal to their walking speed, meaning they can scale vertical surfaces as quickly as they walk on flat ground. This alone is excellent, allowing Dampiers to access areas other characters cannot reach easily. But at third level, the ability improves dramatically. Dampiers can move up, down, and across vertical surfaces and even upside down along ceilings while leaving their hands free. They can run along walls, they can walk across ceilings, they can fight while inverted. The tactical implications are enormous. Spider climb transforms how Dampiers approach combat. Melee-focused Dampiers can climb out of reach of earthbound enemies, forcing opponents to waste actions trying to reach them. They can drop from above for surprise attacks. They can position themselves to attack from unexpected angles. Ranged-focused Dampiers become exceptional snipers, able to position themselves in locations that are effectively unreachable by most enemies. They can fire from above, giving them superior sightlines while making it difficult for enemies to return fire. Even caster Dampiers benefit tremendously, able to position themselves safely out of reach while maintaining line of sight to their targets. Spider climb also revolutionizes exploration. Dampiers can scout by climbing building exteriors and looking through upper windows. They can access areas designed to be unreachable. They can bypass traps and obstacles by simply climbing around them. They can escape danger by climbing where pursuers cannot follow. The ability is versatile enough to be useful in virtually every session, constantly creating options that other characters do not have. The Vampiric Bite is the Dampier's signature ability and their most mechanically complex feature. The Bite functions as a simple melee weapon that deals 1d4 piercing damage. This is not impressive compared to actual weapons, but the Bite has several unique properties that make it powerful despite the low base damage. First, the Bite uses Constitution for hand damage rolls instead of Strength or Dexterity. This is unusual and powerful for several reasons. Constitution is primarily a defensive stat that normally doesn't contribute to offense. Allowing Bite attacks to use Constitution means Dampiers can be simultaneously very durable and reasonably effective in combat without needing to split their ability score increases between offensive and defensive stats. This is particularly valuable for classes that want high Constitution anyway, like barbarians or frontline fighters. Second, while missing half or more of their hit points, dampiers gain advantage on bite attacks. This represents desperation and hunger, making them more ferocious and less concerned with defense. From a mechanical perspective, it creates an interesting risk-reward dynamic. Dampiers become more dangerous as they become more wounded, encouraging aggressive play even when injured. Third, and most importantly, when dampiers successfully bite a creature that isn't a construct or undead, they can empower themselves in one of two ways. They can regain hit points equal to the piercing damage dealt, providing emergency healing without requiring spell slots or other resources. Alternatively, they can gain a bonus equal to the piercing damage dealt to their next ability check or attack roll. This bonus can be saved for the right moment, creating interesting tactical decisions about when to use the empowerment. The bite can be used to empower the dampier a number of times per day, equal to their proficiency bonus, which scales from 2 at low levels to 6 at high levels. This means dampiers have consistent access to their vampiric power throughout the day without being able to use it so frequently that it becomes routine or overwhelming. The bite's versatility is its greatest strength. Need healing in an emergency? Bite someone. Need to make an important skill check? Bite someone first to gain a bonus. Need to hit with an important attack? Bite someone to gain accuracy. The ability provides options and flexibility that few other racial abilities can match. However, the bite also creates role-playing challenges and opportunities. Using the bite means physically biting other creatures, which is intimate, violent, and disturbing. Even willing allies might be uncomfortable being bitten. Enemies certainly object. Using the bite on intelligent creatures raises ethical questions that attacking with a sword does not. The bite forces dampiers to literally consume their victims in a way that is impossible to separate from vampiric predation. Together, these abilities create a cohesive package that makes dampiers feel distinctly vampiric without being overwhelming. They are faster, more mobile, able to operate in darkness and airless environments, and can temporarily empower themselves by literally consuming their enemies. They feel predatory and dangerous while remaining balanced with other player options. The psychology of endless hunger. Living as a dampier means living with constant hunger that can never be permanently satisfied. This creates profound psychological pressures that define the dampier experience and separate them from normal mortals or even from other supernatural beings who have their own challenges. The nature of dampier hunger is fundamentally different from normal hunger. When a human is hungry, they can eat and become full. The hunger goes away. Dampiers never experience this. Feeding provides temporary relief, a brief respite from the gnawing emptiness, but the hunger always returns. It is a wound that can never fully heal, a thirst that can never be completely quenched, an ache that is temporarily eased but never eliminated. This creates a psychological state similar to addiction. The dampier always knows that relief is possible through feeding. They always know exactly what they need to do to make the hunger stop, at least temporarily. But satisfying the hunger requires doing something that might be unethical, dangerous, or socially unacceptable. The temptation is constant, the justifications are always available, and the relief, when obtained, is genuine but fleeting. Different dampiers develop different relationships with their hunger. Some view it as a simple biological necessity, no more moral or immoral than a normal creature needing to eat. They feed pragmatically, taking what they need without guilt or excessive indulgence. These dampiers have made peace with their nature. They are not what they were, but they are functional and adapted to their circumstances. They might prefer not to need blood or flesh or psychic energy, but they do need these things, and denying reality serves no purpose. Others view their hunger as a curse to be fought. They resist feeding as long as possible, taking only when absolutely necessary, and always from sources they have judged morally acceptable. These dampiers live in constant struggle, fighting their own nature every day. They never allow themselves to become comfortable with feeding, maintaining vigilance against the possibility of sliding into monstrosity. The psychological cost is enormous. They experience constant discomfort, constant temptation, constant awareness that they are one moment of weakness away from doing something terrible. Some dampiers embrace their hunger as a source of power. They view themselves as predators, superior to the prey animals around them. They feed freely, justifying their actions through ideology or simple self-interest. These dampiers often walk a dangerous line. Some maintain ethical boundaries, feeding only on enemies or those who deserve it. Others gradually erode all restrictions, becoming the monsters that others fear. The path from justified predation to true evil is shorter than most realize. Many dampiers oscillate between these positions depending on circumstances. When well-fed and in control, they can be philosophical about their nature. When starving and desperate, they discover depths of ruthlessness they didn't know they possessed. When comfortable and safe, they can maintain strict ethical standards. When threatened and cornered, they will do whatever necessary to survive. This inconsistency can be as disturbing as consistently evil behavior, as the dampier never quite knows who they will be when truly tested. The social impact of being a creature of hunger cannot be overstated. Dampiers must constantly monitor themselves in the presence of others. Around the wounded, they fight the urge to feed on easy prey. Around the sleeping, they feel the pull of vulnerability and opportunity. In combat, they must decide whether to use their bite, knowing that doing so might disturb their allies even as it aids the group. Every interaction is complicated by hunger. Every relationship affected by the constant awareness that the dampier views others, at least partly, as potential food. This creates a particular kind of loneliness. Even those who accept dampiers intellectually are often uncomfortable around them emotionally. The knowledge that a companion sees you as potential sustenance creates inevitable distance. Trust becomes complicated when one party has literal predatory instincts toward the other. Intimacy becomes fraught when hunger is always present in the background of every interaction. Dampiers also struggle with self-image and identity. Are they still the person they were before transformation? Or has vampiric hunger fundamentally changed who they are? When they look in mirrors, which they can, unlike true vampires, do they recognize the creature looking back? When they think about their future, do they see themselves becoming more or less human over time? These questions often have no clear answers, creating existential uncertainty that compounds other psychological pressures. Many dampiers develop complex coping mechanisms. Strict feeding schedules help some feel in control. Detailed rules about acceptable and unacceptable feeding practices provide ethical frameworks. Rituals around feeding transform it from shameful necessity to meaningful practice. Distance from others reduces temptation but increases isolation. Constant vigilance prevents loss of control but creates exhaustion. Some dampiers seek magical or alchemical solutions. Perhaps there are potions that suppress hunger temporarily. Perhaps there are enchantments that make the hunger less acute. Perhaps there are alternative food sources that satisfy vampiric needs without requiring harming others. These solutions, if they exist, are rare and valuable, offering hope that dampier existence might become more bearable. The possibility of losing control entirely haunts all dampiers. Van Richten's guide notes that overindulgence leads to viewing others solely as prey. This is the nightmare scenario, the moment when humanity erodes completely under vampiric instinct. Most dampiers have no clear idea where that line is. How much feeding is too much? How many times can they justify taking more than necessary before it becomes pattern rather than exception? When does pragmatic feeding become indulgent? Feeding become predatory? Feeding become monstrous feeding? The slope is slippery, the distinctions unclear, and the stakes are one's own soul. The social existence of monsters. Dampiers face extraordinary social challenges regardless of their actual behavior or intentions. The simple fact of being dampiers marks them as dangerous, inhuman, and suspect. Even in cosmopolitan cities where strange beings are relatively common, dampiers encounter prejudice and fear. The first challenge is physical appearance. Dampiers might try to hide their nature, but truly concealing it is difficult. The pale skin can be explained as illness or northern heritage. The sharp features might pass as simply unfortunate looks, but the fangs are unmistakable when revealed. The unnatural grace eventually becomes obvious. The fact that they never breathe hard after exertion draws attention. Someone watching carefully will notice inconsistencies that reveal inhuman nature. Many dampiers learn to manage their appearance carefully. They train themselves to breathe regularly even though they don't need to, mimicking normal respiratory patterns. They practice moving less gracefully, deliberately introducing small imperfections into their movements. They carefully control their expressions to avoid revealing fangs. They wear clothing that covers pale skin. This constant performance is exhausting, requiring concentration and vigilance to maintain the illusion of normalcy. Even successfully passing as human, or elf, or dwarf, or whatever their original race was, doesn't eliminate all problems. Dampiers radiate something that makes instinctive parts of the brain uncomfortable. Animals react to them as predators. Children who haven't learned to suppress instinctive reactions often cry or hide. Perceptive individuals feel uneasy without being able to articulate why. The dampier might seem normal on conscious examination, but something about them triggers primitive survival responses. When dampier nature becomes known, reactions vary by culture and circumstances. In lands with significant undead problems, dampiers are often immediately treated as threats. Laws might prohibit them from entering cities or require them to register with authorities. Mobs might form to drive them out or destroy them preemptively. Even those willing to tolerate dampiers often keep them at arm's length, never truly accepting them as part of the community. Some dampiers respond to persecution by becoming exactly what others fear. If society will treat them as monsters regardless of their behavior, why not embrace monstrosity? These dampiers often turn to crime, banditry, or other antisocial activities, reasoning that they have nothing to lose. Others flee civilization entirely, living in wilderness or ruins where they won't be hunted. Still others travel constantly, never staying anywhere long enough for their nature to become widely known. The lucky few find acceptance in unusual communities. Adventuring parties often include strange beings and might accept a dampier member, especially one who proves trustworthy and useful. Some cities, particularly those with diverse populations or cosmopolitan attitudes, might tolerate dampiers who obey laws and don't cause problems. Organizations that hunt undead sometimes recruit dampiers, valuing their unique perspectives and abilities despite concerns about their nature. Even when accepted, dampiers face ongoing challenges in maintaining relationships. Friendships are complicated by hunger and predatory instincts. The dampier must constantly suppress urges to feed on companions. Friends must consciously ignore the fact that their companion sees them as potential food. Trust requires ignoring instincts on both sides. Romantic relationships face even greater complications. Physical intimacy is fraught when one partner has fangs and predatory drives. The dampier must maintain constant control to avoid harming their partner. The partner must accept being vulnerable to someone whose instincts scream to feed. Some dampiers avoid romance entirely, concluding that the risks outweigh any potential benefits. Others find partners who are either extraordinarily trusting or who have their own monstrous elements and understand the challenges involved. Dampier parents face impossible choices. Do they have children, knowing those children might inherit dampier traits? Do they risk passing on the curse that defines their existence? If they do have children, how do they explain their nature? When do they reveal that one parent is partially undead? How do they teach children to manage hunger and control instincts if those children are also dampiers? Professional life is similarly complicated. Many professions become difficult or impossible for known dampiers. Positions requiring public trust are often closed to them. Careers involving food preparation or medical care raise obvious concerns. Even adventuring can be challenging, as many groups are reluctant to travel with beings whose hunger might overcome them at inopportune moments. Some dampiers find that their nature actually provides professional advantages. monster hunters value their ability to understand undead psychology and tactics. Tactics. Some military units recruit dampiers for their combat abilities and lack of fear regarding undead enemies. Intelligence agencies might employ dampiers as infiltrators, using their supernatural abilities for espionage. Criminal organizations might value dampiers as enforcers or assassins. These opportunities come with their own problems, as they often require the dampier to embrace the violent and predatory aspects of their nature. Legal status varies wildly by jurisdiction. Some lands outlaw dampiers entirely, treating them as undead creatures to be destroyed on sight. Others require registration and monitoring, allowing dampiers to exist but under close supervision. A few progressive regions treat dampiers as simply another sapient species deserving equal rights. Most fall somewhere between these extremes, with the de facto tolerance depending heavily on local attitudes and specific circumstances. Religious institutions often have strong opinions about dampiers. Faiths focused on destroying undead frequently view dampiers as abominations, neither properly alive nor properly dead, existing in defiance of natural law. Clerics of life deities might see dampiers as corrupted beings requiring redemption or destruction. However, some religious traditions take more nuanced views. Faiths focused on balance or accepting all paths might welcome dampiers. Gods associated with death, darkness, or transition might even favor them as beings who embody liminality. The constant rejection and prejudice creates psychological damage even in relatively well-adjusted dampiers. Being continuously reminded that you are seen as monstrous, dangerous, and unwelcome takes a toll. Many dampiers develop defensive personalities, keeping others at distance emotionally to avoid eventual rejection. Others become aggressive or hostile, attacking before being attacked. Some internalize the hatred directed at them, concluding that they truly are monsters deserving of persecution. A few exceptional dampiers manage to maintain healthy psychology despite prejudice. They develop strong sense of self independent of others' opinions. They find communities that accept them or build new communities of fellow outcasts. They focus on actions rather than nature, proving through behavior that they are more than the sum of their vampiric traits. These dampiers often become powerful advocates for acceptance, using their experiences to argue for judging individuals by choices rather than by biology. The adventurer's curse and blessing. Dampiers are naturally suited for adventuring life in ways that few other peoples are. This is simultaneously blessing and curse, as the things that make them excellent adventurers are often the same things that make them ill-suited for peaceful existence. The most obvious advantage is direct combat capability. Dampiers' increased speed lets them control battlefields better than most characters. Their spider climb ability provides extraordinary tactical flexibility, letting them position themselves advantageously and avoid enemy attacks. Their vampiric bite gives them emergency healing and combat boosts without requiring spell slots or other limited resources. These abilities combine to make dampiers dangerous in almost any situation. Classes that benefit from high constitution particularly synergize with dampier abilities. Barbarians can use Constitution for both their unarmored defense and their vampiric bite attacks, creating incredibly durable characters who remain threatening even when not raging. Fighters can use their bite as an alternative attack option, gaining versatility without sacrificing their primary weapons. Monks can incorporate the bite into their unarmed strike options, though this interacts with martial arts in potentially complex ways. Casters also benefit tremendously from dampier abilities. Wizards and sorcerers typically have poor mobility and defense. Spider climb partially solves both problems, letting them position themselves out of melee range while maintaining line of sight for spells. The ability to see in darkness complements many battlefield control spells. The bite provides emergency healing when they would otherwise be helpless. Warlocks make particularly thematic dampiers, as both rely on dark pacts and supernatural power. Clerics and paladins of good alignments create interesting character concepts when combined with dampier lineage. These characters prove that nature doesn't determine morality, that one can carry vampiric taint while serving holy causes. The mechanical synergy is also strong. Both classes benefit from high constitution, making the bite effective. Both classes have healing options that the bite can supplement. The spider climb provides mobility these typically slow classes lack. Rogues and rangers represent perhaps the most natural dampier classes. Spider climb transforms rogues into incredible infiltrators and scouts. The ability to scale buildings, ceilings, and walls while leaving hands free makes them nearly unstoppable for gathering information or bypassing security. Rangers benefit from similar mobility advantages while also having thematic synergy as hunters who might see themselves hunting their own monstrous kin. The social aspects of adventuring create mixed outcomes for dampiers. On one hand, adventuring parties are often composed of misfits, outcasts, and strange beings. A party with a tiefling, a drow, and a half-orc might barely blink at adding a dampier. Everyone has their issues. What's one more? This accepting environment can be the first time a dampier experiences genuine acceptance. On the other hand, party dynamics can be complicated by dampier hunger. The dampier must constantly suppress urges to feed on injured companions. Other party members must consciously trust that the dampier won't lose control. Using the vampiric bite ability in combat means literally biting enemies, which can disturb even experienced adventurers. Explaining to new party members that yes, they are partially undead, and yes, they have vampiric hunger requires difficult conversations. Many dampiers are drawn to adventuring specifically as monster hunters. They possess unique advantages when fighting undead. They understand vampiric psychology and tactics from personal experience. They can track undead by recognizing signs other hunters might miss. They feel personal stakes in destroying the kind of creature whose power they share. Some seek vengeance against specific vampires who created them or killed loved ones. Others fight a broader war against vampire kind, trying to prevent others from suffering transformation. The monster hunting life suits dampier psychology in complex ways. It provides outlet for aggression and predatory instincts. It gives moral framework for violence, It allows feeding on evil creatures without guilt. It creates distance from normal society that dampiers often prefer anyway. But it also risks romanticizing violence and creating dependency on conflict for emotional regulation. Some dampiers become professional bounty hunters or mercenaries. Their tracking abilities, combat capabilities, and willingness to work at night make them valuable for dangerous missions. They can pursue targets other hunters cannot catch. They can operate in conditions that would defeat normal hunters. They don't need elaborate supply chains since they can feed on their environment. These practical advantages often overcome prejudice when money is involved. Dampier spies and infiltrators serve various organizations. Their ability to climb anywhere, operate in darkness, and go without breathing makes them nearly ideal for espionage. Their supernatural nature actually aids infiltration in some contexts, as they can access places designed to be impossible to reach. They can remain hidden in locations that would kill normal infiltrators through suffocation or exposure. Their only weakness is that being discovered as dampiers often ends missions dramatically. Explorers and archaeologists sometimes number dampiers among their ranks. The ability to access difficult locations through climbing, operate without air, and see in darkness makes dampiers perfect for exploring ruins, caves, and other dangerous locations. Their supernatural endurance means they can push harder and longer than normal explorers. The main drawback is that many ancient locations have undead guardians or curses that specifically target beings with vampiric taint. Dampier scholars and researchers provide unique perspectives on undead studies. They understand vampiric psychology from inside. They can read ancient texts on vampirism and recognize truth from superstition through direct experience. They might even be able to safely interact with vampire communities in ways that would get normal scholars killed. However, academic institutions are often reluctant to accept dampier faculty or students, creating barriers to formal education. Some dampiers embrace performance arts, becoming actors, musicians, or storytellers. Their unnatural grace and charisma create compelling stage presence. Their direct experience with horror and darkness informs their art. The traveling life of performers suits their need to avoid staying anywhere too long. The artistic community sometimes proves more accepting of unusual beings than mainstream society. The greatest advantage adventuring offers dampiers is purpose. Rather than struggling with meaningless existence defined only by hunger and persecution, adventuring dampiers have goals, missions, and reasons to continue. They are part of something larger than themselves. They contribute meaningfully to the world. This sense of purpose helps many dampiers maintain psychological health and resist sliding into despair or monstrosity. However, adventuring also presents unique temptations. Combat provides ample opportunity to feed without judgment. Using the vampiric bite on enemies is not only acceptable but tactically sound. This makes it easy to indulge hunger under the guise of practical necessity. The line between feeding strategically and feeding compulsively can blur. Some dampiers discover that adventuring enables rather than restricts their darker impulses. The violence inherent to adventuring can also gradually erode ethics. After feeding on dozens of goblins, why not feed on bandits? After bandits, why not prisoners? After prisoners, why not anyone vulnerable? The slope is gradual, but real. Adventuring dampiers must maintain vigilant self-awareness to avoid becoming the monsters they perhaps initially set out to destroy. Transformation into vampires. The dark horizon. One question haunts many dampiers. Can they become true vampires? The answer creates one of the lineage's most interesting tensions. By the rules as written in D&D 5th edition, dampiers are humanoids. The vampire stat block specifies that any humanoid killed by a vampire's bite and buried rises as a vampire spawn the next night. Since dampiers are classified as humanoids, this rule technically applies to them. A dampier who is drained of blood by a vampire and buried would, according to the literal rules, rise as a vampire spawn. This creates fascinating and terrifying implications. Dampiers occupy a middle position between humanity and vampirism. Most resist completing the transformation, clinging to their remaining mortality and humanity. But the possibility exists that they could take that final step, either voluntarily or through circumstances beyond their control. The idea of voluntary transformation is particularly complex. Some dampiers might view full vampirism as inevitable evolution, something they are already partially along the path toward. If they are going to live as half-undead beings anyway, why not embrace the full power and abandon the limitations of mortality? True vampires don't need to breathe just like dampiers, but they also don't need to eat, sleep, or age. They are immune to many more threats. They possess dramatically greater powers. The price is vulnerability to sunlight, running water, and other traditional vampire weaknesses, plus total dependence on blood. For dampiers already drinking blood and dealing with vampiric hunger, that price might seem manageable. Others view potential transformation with horror. They cling desperately to their remaining humanity, precisely because they know how close they are to losing it entirely. Every day they resist becoming full vampires is a victory. The idea of voluntarily surrendering that humanity is unthinkable. They would rather die truly than become the undead monsters whose power they share. Involuntary transformation creates different fears. What if a dampier falls in battle and an enemy vampire feeds on them? What if they are captured and forcibly transformed? What if they are tricked or coerced into accepting vampirism? These scenarios remove agency, transforming the dampier into something they actively resisted becoming. Some dampiers make companions promise to destroy them if they ever begin transforming into full vampires, preferring true death to undead existence. The psychological process of becoming a vampire is relevant here. In D&D lore, vampires retain memories of their mortal lives, but view those memories through fundamentally different psychology. The person you were effectively dies, replaced by an undead creature that remembers being that person, but no longer thinks or feels as they did. For dampiers, this raises questions about continuity of identity. If a dampier becomes a vampire, is it still them? Or has the person they were been destroyed and replaced by something wearing their memories? Some dampiers research their condition obsessively, seeking to understand whether full transformation is truly inevitable or if they can permanently stabilize in their current state. Evidence varies. Some sources suggest dampiers can live entire lifetimes without further transformation. Others hint that dampier existence is inherently unstable, that the vampiric taint gradually consumes more of their humanity over time until transformation becomes inevitable. The uncertainty creates constant anxiety for those who value their remaining morality. The relationship between dampiers and actual vampires also creates transformation risks. Some vampires view dampiers as failed creations requiring completion. They might seek out dampiers to finish what was started, forcibly transforming them into proper vampire spawn. Other vampires see dampiers as abominations, neither properly alive nor properly undead, and seek to destroy them. A few vampires view dampiers as potential recruits, beings who already understand vampiric existence and might be persuaded to embrace full transformation. Dampiers who hunt vampires take particular risks. Every vampire they encounter represents a possible creator or finisher of their transformation. Every fight with vampires risks the wrong outcome, where the dampier dies and rises in service to their enemy. Some vampire hunting dampiers develop elaborate protocols to prevent transformation. They carry means of suicide if captured. They ensure companions know to destroy their bodies if they fall. They avoid being anywhere alone where a vampire might transform them without witnesses. On the other hand, some dampiers actively seek out specific vampires, hoping to force confrontation or demand answers. If a vampire created them, they want to know why. If vampire blood could stabilize their condition or cure them entirely, they will hunt that vampire to obtain it. These quests often end badly, but desperation drives many to attempt them anyway. The Curse of Strahd campaign setting creates particularly complex situations for dampiers. Barovia and similar domains of dread are ruled by powerful vampire lords who shape reality itself within their domains. A dampier in Barovia might feel the pull of Strahd's power more intensely than normal beings do. They might find their hunger amplified or their control weakened. They might even find themselves slowly transforming without any vampire actively attacking them, simply from prolonged exposure to such concentrated vampiric influence. From a storytelling perspective, the possibility of transformation into true vampirism creates natural character arcs. A dampier might struggle throughout a campaign to resist transformation, each close call raising stakes. They might seek cures or means of permanently stabilizing their condition. They might eventually face choice between accepting transformation or sacrificing themselves to prevent it. These are powerful dramatic options that make dampier characters inherently compelling. Paths forward, survival and purpose. Dampiers must find ways to exist in a world that fears and often hates them. Different dampiers choose different paths, each with its own challenges and rewards. Isolation represents the safest but loneliest path. These dampiers withdraw from society, living in wilderness, ruins, or other remote locations. They interact with civilization only when absolutely necessary, minimizing opportunities for their nature to cause problems. Isolation protects both the dampier and others. The dampier doesn't face persecution or temptation to harm others. Society is protected from potential dangers the dampier represents. But isolation exacts terrible psychological costs. Dampiers are still essentially social beings. Centuries of loneliness can drive even stable individuals to madness. Integration into accepting communities offers better outcomes for those who can achieve it. Some cities are cosmopolitan enough to include dampiers among their populations. Some organizations value dampier abilities enough to overlook their nature. Some adventuring parties accept dampiers as valued members. These integrated dampiers still face prejudice, but have support systems and social connections that help them maintain psychological health. The challenge is finding these rare, accepting spaces and maintaining good relationships once found. Constant travel avoids staying anywhere long enough for problems to develop. These wandering dampiers might work as merchants, performers, or traveling warriors. They visit settlements briefly, interacting with people who don't know their nature or won't have time to organize against them before they move on. This provides some social interaction without the vulnerability of permanent residence. However, it also prevents forming deep relationships or establishing real homes. Embracing monstrosity is the dark path some dampiers take. If society will treat them as monsters regardless of behavior, these dampiers reason, why not actually be monsters? They become bandits, assassins, or worse, using their abilities to prey on the societies that rejected them. Some justify this by targeting only the cruel or corrupt. Others abandon all ethical restraints. This path often ends badly, but it provides immediate practical benefits and emotional satisfaction for dampiers consumed by bitterness. Monster hunting attracts many dampiers for understandable reasons. Hunting undead allows them to channel their predatory instincts productively. It gives them purpose and even respect from some quarters. It lets them actively combat the kind of creature whose power they share, proving they are more than their nature. Monster hunting can be psychologically healthy, providing structure, purpose, and moral framework. But it can also become obsessive, defining the dampier's entire existence around violence. Scholarly pursuits offer intellectual rather than physical paths forward. Dampier scholars can contribute unique perspectives on undead, magic, history, and other fields. Their supernatural senses sometimes reveal things normal scholars miss. Their extended lifespans allow them to pursue long-term research projects. However, academic institutions are often reluctant to accept dampiers, creating barriers to formal education and professional recognition. Service to organizations like churches, militaries, or governments provides structure and purpose. These dampiers accept positions where their nature is known, but their abilities are valued. They prove their worth through service, gradually earning trust and acceptance. This path works best in progressive organizations that judge individuals by actions rather than by nature. It fails catastrophically in organizations that merely use dampiers while continuing to see them as expendable monsters. Seeking cures or redemption drives some dampiers. They quest for magic that might restore their original nature or at least stabilize their condition. They serve good causes, hoping divine favor might transform them. They research ancient lore, seeking precedents for reversing vampiric taint. These quests rarely succeed, but the searching itself provides purpose and hope. Creating new communities of fellow outcasts represents another path. Dampiers, along with other marginalized beings, might establish settlements where they can live without persecution. These communities provide acceptance and mutual support. However, they often face hostility from surrounding areas and struggle with internal conflicts between beings with very different natures and needs. Teaching and mentoring other dampiers offers purpose to those with experience. Older dampiers who have learned to manage their condition can help newly transformed individuals understand what is happening to them and how to cope. This passing of knowledge helps new dampiers avoid destructive mistakes and provides the teachers with meaningful purpose. However, it also means maintaining contact with vampiric community and risking exposure. Many dampiers pursue multiple paths simultaneously, or shift between paths as circumstances change. They might adventure for years, retire to scholarly pursuits, eventually return to adventuring when boredom or necessity drives them. The key is finding something beyond mere survival, some purpose or meaning that makes continued existence worthwhile, despite constant challenges. The question ultimately facing every dampier is not just how to survive, but why to continue. Existence defined only by hunger, persecution, and struggle is not worth preserving. Dampiers must find or create reasons to endure, sources of meaning that make their difficult lives worthwhile. Those who find such purpose can live remarkable lives. Those who cannot often succumb to despair, monstrosity, or self-destruction. Conclusion. Forever between dampiers exist in liminal space between life and death, between human and monster, between accepted and rejected. They are marked by transformation they neither sought nor deserved in many cases, carrying vampiric taint that defines every aspect of their existence. They hunger constantly for sustenance only the living can provide, struggling daily with predatory instincts they must control or be controlled by. The tragedy of dampiers is that they are neither what they were nor fully what they have become. They are perpetually incomplete, stuck in transition that never resolves. They cannot return to their original nature. Most refuse to complete transformation into true vampires. They remain forever between, forever struggling, forever defined by what they have lost and what they refuse to become. Yet there is also triumph in dampier existence. They demonstrate that nature does not dictate behavior, that beings touched by evil can choose good, that monsters can become heroes. Every day, a dampier resists their darker impulses is a victory. Every person they save, despite their hunger, proves their humanity remains intact. Every relationship they maintain, despite their nature, shows that connection is possible even for outcasts. Dampiers represent D&D's exploration of what it means to be cursed with power, blessed with abilities that come at terrible costs. They embody questions about identity, morality, and choice that resonate beyond fantasy gaming. If your fundamental nature pulls you toward darkness, does resisting that pull make you heroic? If you must harm others to survive, does the necessity excuse the harm? If you are seen as monstrous, do you have responsibility to prove otherwise? Or can you simply be who you are? These questions have no simple answers, which is precisely what makes dampiers compelling. They force players and storytellers to grapple with genuinely difficult ethical and philosophical issues. They create characters whose internal struggles are as interesting as their external adventures. They provide opportunities to explore themes of addiction, persecution, identity, and redemption in ways that pure heroes or villains cannot. For players considering dampier characters, the lineage offers both mechanical advantages and rich role-playing opportunities. The abilities are genuinely useful without being overwhelming. The psychological complexity creates endless character development possibilities. The social challenges provide automatic plot hooks and relationship complications. A well-played dampier can be one of the most interesting characters at any table. For dungeon masters, dampier player characters create opportunities and challenges. Their nature provides natural connections to undead-related plots. Their hunger creates complications that must be addressed. Their social struggles offer chances for thoughtful exploration of prejudice and acceptance. However, dampier characters also require careful management. The DM must ensure the player's hunger is meaningful without being punishing, that their vampiric nature matters without dominating every session. In the end, dampiers stand as testament to one of D&D's great strengths, its ability to take dark fantasy concepts and make them playable, to transform horror tropes into compelling player options, to create space for exploring difficult themes within the framework of adventure and heroism. They are creatures of shadow and hunger, yes, but they are also proof that even those touched by darkness can choose to walk in light. That even those born or made as monsters can become heroes, that even those forever between worlds can find purpose and meaning in that eternal threshold. The Dampier's journey is not about reaching some final destination where they are fully healed or fully transformed. It is about learning to exist in the between, to find meaning in the struggle itself, to build identity not on what they were or might become, but on who they choose to be, despite their nature. It is about demonstrating through daily choice and accumulated actions that they are more than the sum of their vampiric traits, more than the hunger that defines so much of their existence. And perhaps that is the ultimate message of the Dhampir lineage. We are all, in our ways, between things. We all struggle with natures we did not choose, instincts we must control, hungers we must manage. The Dhampir simply makes these universal struggles more literal, more dramatic, more obviously supernatural. But the themes resonate because they reflect real human experiences of fighting against parts of ourselves, of trying to be better than our worst impulses, of seeking acceptance despite our flaws. In vampire folklore, dampiers were the hunters, the protectors, the beings who used their cursed nature to defend the innocent. In D&D, they can be that and more. Scholars, heroes, outcasts who find belonging, monsters who choose redemption, beings who prove every day that what you are matters far less than what you choose to do with what you are. That is the legacy of the Dhampir, the children of vampires who walk in daylight, the hunters who share their prey's blood, the creatures forever between who nevertheless find ways to exist, to contribute, to matter. They are D&D's tribute to the Balkan folklore that created them. Adapted and expanded for a fantasy universe where anyone might become something other than what they were, where transformation is possible in either direction, where the only real question is not what you are, but who you choose to be. In the shadows between life and death, the Dampiers walk their narrow paths, forever hungry, forever vigilant, forever proving that even those cursed with predatory nature can choose to protect rather than prey, to save rather than consume, to light candles in the darkness rather than becoming part of that darkness themselves.